is brewed with intention. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome back to Tea Time Podcast, Tea Time TV, where we dive into conversations that centered around truth, therapy, and transformation. The one place where music meets culture. And let's just jump right into it, man. Today we're discussing one of the most talked about criminal cases currently making headlines, and that's the case involving David Burke and the tragic death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. I'm sorry. So before we get started, I want to make something clear. Everything that's going to be discussed today in this episode, it comes from publicly reported information and testimonies presented in court. So David Burke has pleaded not guilty. And under our legal system, he's presumed innocent unless or until proven guilty in court. So this episode is not about deciding guilt or innocence. It's about understanding the legal process and separating the facts from speculation. We having a conversation about deeper issues that this case brings to light. So how we start things off, we must remember Celeste before discussing evidence or before discussing any kind of court proceedings. Let's remember who this is really about. Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She was just 14 years old. Somebody's daughter, somebody's family, somebody's friend. Sometimes when these high profile cases become so focused on the investigations and so focused on the social media debates, we forget that there was a young life at the center of this whole thing. So whatever the outcome of this case, we all have to keep in mind that a family is grieving every single day, and that deserves compassion. So here at Tea Time, we are sending our condolences and our compassion to the family, the friends, loved ones of Celeste Rivas Hernandez.
It's time for tea time.
So where does the case stand today? If you can see, I was kind of watching some videos and kind of looking over this thing. I believe it's like day 3 of the preliminary hearing is where they at, but the court is currently holding a preliminary hearing. And what a preliminary hearing is it's not a trial. It is where the judge decides whether prosecutors have presented enough evidence for the case to be able to move forward into a trial. So among the testimony presented, investigators described forensic evidence that they say links David Burks to the alleged crime in the situation with Celeste Hernandez Rivas. So prosecutors have had discussions where they have presented evidence, including blood stains found, in the residence, of David, as well as blood stains, lots of blood stains, in David's Tesla. Also, there was a testimony that was addressed where they speak about David purchasing chainsaws, conversations of body bags, related items that prosecutors argue really supports their theory behind this case. What the defense has challenged are aspects. They have challenged aspects of the evidence and disputes of the prosecution's interpretation. So, additional testimonies described that investigators have found numerous air fresheners inside of the Tesla, where Celeste's remains were recovered. Prosecutors are arguing that that these things support their timeline, while defense is contesting, those conclusions. So these are the allegations and the evidence that are being presented in the court proceedings, but they have not yet been evaluated by the jury. So for anybody who may be lost, you need to understand, how does the legal process go? I've noticed many people online treating this hearing as though it's the trial, as if the trial has already happened. And that's not how our justice system works. Being a former law and justice teacher, um, I have a understanding, into, how the system works, especially when it comes down to preliminary hearings and trials and, working with my behavior students, having to teach them how this whole thing unfolds. So a preliminary hearing asks one question, is there enough evidence to, in this case, for us to proceed? The prosecution's burden here is much lower than at a trial. So if the case moves forward, prosecutors will eventually have to prove every criminal charge beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's just one of the foundations of our legal system. But we have to hone back in because, as I mentioned, a lot of things get focused on the social media debate, and a lot of things are being non-understood, misconstrued, due to people not understanding exactly where we are, in this case. We're living in a time where people often, reach a verdict before a courtroom ever does. There's so many social media clips going around, TikTok theories, YouTube commentary, Facebook debates. Like, I've been seeing it all, I've been watching it all, and I have to go to the source, I have to go to the facts, especially when it's a case as big as something like this, as serious as something like this. Sometimes people become the judge, they become the jury, they become the executioner before they even hear all of the evidence, even if, all evidence point towards, what the verdict may be. But it's even more, important to respect due process while showing compassion for victim and their families, because in one instance you have somebody, fighting on the stand, and the other instance you have somebody seeking justice. So I want to take time to step away from the legal side for a minute and talk a little bit more about, some things that I feel, are more important, as someone who works, in behavioral health, as someone that's a father. Cases like this affect me a little differently. When tragedies involving children happen, they don't just impact one family. They impact entire communities. They affect parents who suddenly hug their kids a little bit tighter, kiss them a little bit longer, stare at them, just a longer while. They affect teenagers, who begin to question, who can they trust, especially in situations like this where, you're just a fan, and advantage, can be taken on a person. I mean, you become vulnerable in situations where you may feel that trust is there, so it definitely affects our communities. It affects parents, it affects teenagers, it affects teachers, it affects counselors, neighbors, friends. Trauma spreads way far beyond the immediate people that are involved. So one thing we need to normalize is having difficult conversations with our children. Not conversations that are rooted in fear, but conversations rooted in awareness. Teach your children that they can always call you. Teach them to trust their instincts. Teach them that secrets making them uncomfortable should never stay hidden. Teach them that asking for help is a strength, it's not a weakness. And if you're a parent and you're listening today, I know life gets busy. It gets busy for all of us with work, bills, responsibilities, but sometimes our greatest investment is not another hour at work. It's another hour with our children. It's one more conversation. It's one more check-in. One more reminder that they're loved. One more reminder that they have somebody. Because when we look past the situation, we look past the legal side of it, and we dig more into the reality of it. This young lady should have been able to speak out to somebody and provide some type of insight to things that were going on. some type of insight to bring awareness for somebody to put a closer eye on the situation. It should never get this far before the awareness happens. And that leads me to wanting to have a conversation with my young men that's listening. Character matters. Integrity matters. How you treat women matters. How you treat people matters. How you handle rejection matters. How you manage your anger. How you balance your emotions. It all matters. Mental health isn't only about anxiety. It's not about depression. It's also about emotional regulation. Being able to balance it, being able to take it, own accountability, reflect empathy, show respect. Mental health is much deeper than what the surface level shows. And these are skills that we have to intentionally teach, intentionally model. If we truly want safer communities, we have to raise emotionally healthy young people. Healing isn't just isn't just personal, it's generational. We take time to think back to how we were affected by so many things growing up, not able to speak to somebody about them because we didn't feel that we had that person. Break the generational curse, be that person. As I take time today and I go through my therapy sessions, and the things that come up is so many stored problems, so much stored trauma, so much that we don't even remember happened until we're exposed to something that brings it forward. And that's in both situations, because the young man in the situation, we also have to look at from a mental health standpoint as well, to be bold enough, allegedly, to carry out such acts. Healing is not personal. We truly have to contribute to building safer communities. We have to truly contribute to raising emotionally healthy young people. But I'm gonna keep following this case, man. I don't really want to be another person who comes forward and who's following it day by day and giving the insight on it, because a lot of the insight and stuff is false. So just continue to check your sources and continue to make sure you're following the right information to assure that certain things are not missed, as justice will be served. I don't know how this case will ultimately end, but the courts will determine that. But I do know this, every tragedy should challenge us to become better people. Um, Challenge us to communicate more. Challenge us to protect one another. Challenge us to value life, to slow down before rushing to judgment. Tragedy should challenge us to support victims and grieving families. Justice is about facts. Compassion is about humanity. And both can exist at the same time. As more information comes forward, more verified information becomes available. We'll do our best to stay updated, keep things honest, show respect, maintain our responsibility.
It's
Because that's
time
just what
for
we do
tea
here at Tea
time.
Time. Once again, sending our condolences, sending our compassion out to the family, the friends, the loved ones of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Just going to continue to follow the case. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, I ask that you share this episode with someone who values thoughtful discussion. Follow us on Instagram at _ Tea Time TV _, and that'll give you updates, behind the scenes content, just day by day, how we contribute to the community and how we, continue to spread awareness in regards to mental health. Be sure to subscribe to Tea Time TV on YouTube to get the visuals for the weekly podcast, as well as the reaction videos that we do, community conversations, new music. It's all right there on the channel. If you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, email us at teatimecast@gmail.com. If you want to be, a guest on our show, email us at teatimecast@gmail.com. And just remember, man, protect your peace. Protect your peace, continue to seek truth, and choose growth. It's Royal T. It's been Tea Time Podcast.
It's time for
Until
tea
next
time.
time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep transforming.